After the crapshoot that was Venom, Let There Be Carnage, Sony is still eager to prove just how terrible they are at making Marvel comic book movies. Yes, it's hard to believe that Marvel movies not made by Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios still exist. But the last holdout, Sony, is bound and determined that its SSU, that's Sony's Spider-Man universe for the uninformed, will be just as profitable as Marvel Studios' MCU. From director Daniel Espinosa, who previously helmed Life for Sony, the movie about astronauts that find an alien life form strangely similar to the Venom alien symbiote, comes Morbius. Because if Espinosa can make a movie that reminds audiences of Venom, then maybe he can direct an actual comic book movie too. Seems like logical credentials to me. Morbius stars Jared Leto, because Sony thought it'd be fun to let him ruin a Marvel character too. Though to be fair, Leto's performance as the titular Michael Morbius is not terrible. Bland, sure, but not Joker laughable. Morbius has a rare disease that has left him crippled and will entirely kill him. He decides the cure is to splice human and bat DNA, and this is the part of the story that actually does have logic. Surprisingly, Morbius's mad scientist experiment goes awry, and now he's a living vampire. I.e., he has all of a vampire's strengths and needs to consume blood to survive, but is not undead, so he has none of a vampire's weaknesses. Now Morbius must fight the monster within him and find a way to survive without killing the innocent, and also stop his best friend Milo, played by Matt Smith, who wants to use Morbius's cure on himself. As stated, Leto's performance isn't terrible, but it's not particularly good either. There is no real depth or emotional connection amongst the characters, and the dialogue is trite and generic. What we get is another movie that plays up moments or scenes as if having emotional gravitas where none exist. Matt Smith as the main antagonist can be entertaining at times when he's not channeling his inner Tobey Maguire and doing random Saturday night villain struts. I would argue though that the film's best acting does come from Matt Smith. Ultimately, however, Morbius does tell a cohesive story that is an adequate representation of the character's story in the comics. The movie's biggest problem is that it just expects audiences to accept it at face value because it is a comic book movie. Rather than create a world that feels real with characters that have believable motivations and thought processes, it just wholly throws some of the more outlandish aspects of the comic at you without building a world on which they could seem plausible. Add on top of it generic characters and dialogue, and the movie is nothing special. It's not as terrible as critics have made it out to be, but it is a mostly pointless venture. Hardcore fans and general audiences just looking for a cookie-cutter comic flick will be entertained. But for those of us that have left the mediocrity of early 2000s superhero films behind, it's a chore to get through. I give Morbius 2 out of 4 stars.